Baseball.
Oh,
Baseball.
oh. Okay. We are live, and so I'm going to introduce you briefly here, and then
Baseball.
Scott, I want you to introduce yourself. And sorry,
We are live.
so sorry, got rid of that echo. All right. So, hi everyone. I'm Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. Very happy to be here today. I'm here with Dr. Scott Perez, and actually, I've met him in person at an event as well. But I've also interviewed him dozens of times, I think. And so he's got some very interesting stuff to talk to us about today. And he's also going to give a brief introduction to himself, and then what we'll do is we'll talk some more about what has happened to him in terms of the hurricane, because he was in the hurricanes, and his house and so on. So I think that would be interesting for people to hear. So Scott, go ahead and introduce yourself so that people that haven't seen other interviews know a little bit about you.
Sure. Well, it is Halloween. I'm a giant Dodger fan. I'm wearing a Clayton Kershaw jersey, and I was happy to see them win the World Series last night. I'm a chemist by degree. I have like a double degree, chemistry and biology, and undergraduate bachelor level. I have a master's and PhD in chemistry. So I'm a scientist. That means that I went through the process of indoctrination in the educational system in the United States for what it's worth, right? Because that process is a process of teaching you how to go from mathematics and physics in textbooks into hands-on laboratory work, and then elevate yourself to the research level where you can create that work yourself. You create your experiments yourself. And then once you move from that area to the cutting edge, you go on to publications and journals and patents and create real world technology that may change the landscape. So my background is that I worked my way through school. I grew up working on the docks with my dad, tugs, barges, oil tankers, chemical tankers, jet tankers, ammonia tankers, everything you can imagine out of the port, which lost power here in Milton. And that's where all the fuel comes in here. So we didn't have any fuel for a few days. That was catastrophe after Helene, which hit us. That was a historic hurricane. The storm was a flood that really was unexpected by a lot of natives. It was the worst since 1916, and a lot of us brushed it off. I brushed it off. I was very fortunate and thankful to be one of only two people on the street that I live on that's their house didn't flood. My neighbor to the south of me and myself, although we were fighting the high tide as it started to come creep into my daughter's room 1 millimeter more, it would have been crazy. Part of this was in fact the sewer backing up through people's tubs and toilets and whatnot. And I don't recommend the experience, but it certainly was life changing. There was a lot of electrical damage to things like garage refrigerators. My BMW M3 in the garage is probably totaled. Fridge in the garage, pool pump, fences. Well, the fence damage, that was Helene, and that was on a Thursday. So we were all picking up and trying to recover from that. My pool was flooded. It was black. Um, it was just crazy. Everything was crazy. People's houses were destroyed. They took everything out and stacked it in giant piles in front of their houses. And then they started talking about Milton being a Cat 5 storm, which was very interesting. My, you know, my wife was already freaked out. So by Sunday, after Helene, we had boarded the house already. I already had the boards cut from the 2005, 2006 hurricanes. We put those up, and then we started packing up. I had a bunch of large yellow and black totes and duffel bags, and we bugged out from here to my mother's house north of us to avoid Milton, because if Milton would have come up into the bay, it would have brought a 20-foot storm surge, and Helene was 9, and we almost didn't survive that. It would have been catastrophic. The structure I live in would have been gone, a lot more damage. Fortunately, we had a lot of wind damage, fences, house, truck, and no power. So when I woke up at 4:30 in the morning after Milton, I had to clear the roads to get here from my mother's house. And then when I got here, I started running on generator power. So we ran on alternate power for 8 days straight off the grid. And it's like a roller coaster ride once you get on the generator, because then it's maintain fuel on the generator, make sure the oil's changed, make sure the filters are changed, the plugs, and all of this stuff. So one of the problems I mentioned with the port here, we lost power in the port. So I had a lot of gas stored up. I had gas and things like jet skis and my truck. We ran on that until we got power in the port and gasoline started moving. Then, 5-gallon cans, a lot of that, and quite a big fuel bill. But you do that in order to keep your food in your refrigerator. And if you can run an air conditioner, it was quite hot here, although it cooled down a little bit from the hurricane. It's eventful, and you need to be prepared for these kind of conditions. People always talk about 3 days without power. I just went 8 easy. But after that, in the middle of this, you're taking a beating from trying to clean up and fix things and get back to life. And then you take another beating from Milton. So it's been eventful, to say the least.
Okay. So, but you and another house survived those storms, and you of course know that they were directed and, with an, you know, directed
You
energy
know,
weapon and all
that
that.
this is a good segue into today's discussion about the hydrogen world that we live in, because the hydrogen world that we live in, okay, it is responsible for the energy transfer. If I could just show the picture, it's responsible. I could share my screen.
Mhm. Yeah, you should.
Okay. And let me make sure I bring that.
Do you mean the one that the banner for the show, or do you mean a different picture?
Just it'll be on the whiteboard. Oh, so let me. There it is. Window. Oh,
So you know how to you click the green
yeah.
share button and all of that.
Here, can you see the entire screen?
Right now we don't see anything but us. You haven't shared it yet, so I don't know if you've just got it. It has to be opened on your desktop
Oh,
first.
there it is. It's open.
Okay. Now you're showing me, but okay.
Okay, you see that?
Yes.
Okay. All right. This is really the subject of today's discussion, but it is related to the hurricanes and the weather on the planet, or the space rock that we live on. So we live on a, for lack of better terms, a space rock. It's a rock, which is covered in about 70% water, which is hydrogen oxide. And so the sun, which is in the picture here, is a hydrogen fusion reactor. That's what it is. It's 109 times bigger than the Earth, but it is a fusion reactor that runs on hydrogen fusion. So the energy transfer and also the other interactions of physics interactions on our planet affect the oceans and transfer of heat to those oceans that create the weather that affect all the land. So essentially, the power for hurricanes comes from this fusion reactor. It's important to think about that because you got thermal cyclones and you got an energy transfer, but it's a system. So we talked a lot about this being a system before. And the simple things are light and radiation and looking at that from a hydrogen perspective. So the fact that the earth is covered by 70% water, it's hydrogen oxide. So you get these physical chemistry transfers of energy, right? In terms of all the electromagnetic spectrum, gravimetric, but also quantum mechanical, right? So you have everything in play here. Everything. Particle physics, quantum entanglement, things that humans don't even understand. I'm a scientist, but I'm still a human. So we don't understand all of the things, but one of the things that we do understand is that the energy transfer is responsible for the weather, right? And that's what we call something. We'll use the term nature or mother nature or a natural phenomenon, right? And then we'll say a hurricane. But when you look at these systems, and we can go in a bunch of directions here, but when you look at these systems and you look at what they represent, you can come down and you can isolate the reactions related to these energy systems, right? So you got photons of light being transferred. And a photon is really an electron. It's a wave particle duality. It's electron. And these electrons do things with water. Well, this reaction is a reaction that I invented. Okay. I put made in America because it was made in America. I'm American. Part of the planet that we're on has a force of gravity, and it is holding the water to the planet. So that is part of an engineering design of the system that we live in on this space rock. And that force of gravity must be there to hold the water. The energy transfer is coming from that fusion reactor, right? So you get interactions with the energy transfer. Here I'm showing an electrical one, an electron, and an interaction on water to make hydrogen oxygen. Well, we breathe oxygen. This is an electrical way of doing it. So while I am a human and I can't say with certainty, define every single math and physics answer to the system that we live in, but the hydrogen system between the hydrogen fusion core reactor and a hydrogen oxide planet, I can't solve and give every answer. I can only present to you from a human perspective, based on human knowledge, based on human math and physics, what's happening. But I can hack the system as a hacker, just like a code hacker hacking a computer program or doing something like that. So what I have done here with this equation is I have used the skills that I have been taught to define a chemical equation that defines water power in this system that is in many ways related to the water power that you see in a thermal cyclone, the water power that you see in a hurricane, or the water power that you see when you simply ignite hydrogen and oxygen and watch them combust. And so the world that we live in, all right, is a balance between that fusion reactor transferring energy to the water and causing the weather. And that enables then the DNA code of the plants that have been put down on the space rock by the engineers of it to grow in that system. Does that make sense?
Sort of, but how does this relate to being, you know, how they say the sun, that we're an electrical universe and that the sun is electrical? How does that relate?
Yes. Well, all of the physics in the electromagnetic spectrum or the gravimetric spectrum or the particle physics or quantum spectrums, all of the physics is in play completely. That means all electrical effects, all right? All electrical effects, all gravimetric effects, all quantum effects, things that are beyond human explanation. I remember I'm a human scientist, which means it means that I went through, let me make sure I'm there and you can see me. It means I went through the human process, right? This was the big part where to be a scientist or to be a realist, you've got to kind of you've got to come down to earth and not live in a box. So when you go through the indoctrination process, they very much have you reading all these textbooks and taking all and doing all this coursework and doing all the labs and things like that in order to gain knowledge. But that is a human system, right? So
As opposed to what? A non-human system? I mean, what are you trying to
as
say?
opposed to the actual reality that we live in.
Okay, so
All
where
right.
are the differences in what you've been taught and what?
Yes, right. So first you've got to realize, and this is where things get difficult for humanity, for us, because what happens is, Carrie, we go into classrooms and we have all these textbooks and we say this is the way it is, but no, this is not the way it is. This is a human interpretation of the way that it is,
Sure.
right? And so
Okay,
why
but
is this important?
yeah.
This is important because many of the problems that we face as humans are not solvable. We can't solve them. Okay. Because if we could, we wouldn't be in the predicaments that we are in today relative to things like energy and wars and resources and elections of all things, right? Election rigging, because we're right there at the door.
Well,
So,
what about this idea that we know, for example, that the dark side has taken control of a lot of these elements. And the bottom line is, according to my sources, that we don't have all weather is now manufactured. We don't have any natural weather because they've messed with it to such a degree that weather is basically always having to be manipulated because they have imbalances that occurred as a result of manipulating the weather. What about that?
yes, yes. So, the Star Wars team in the Reagan era, they did a lot of things with Stanley Meyer, and they knew that the electrical okay, so you have these vortexes that start spinning. They're cyclones, thermal cyclones, tornadoes,
Right.
hurricanes. They spin. as they spin, okay, the water molecule, which is oxygen in the middle and two hydrogens, it bends, it flexes. And the native intelligence that controls the universe and the system tries to bring that back to equilibrium and not let the bonds break. What happens when it's spinning is flexes. And so what happens is the energy that does that, particle physics, it leaks out and you get a lightning bolt and grounds to ground. But as it's spinning, you get electrical effects like an electrical motor and it spins. So the lightning bolts start spinning like an electrical motor, it spins it, right? So you know this, and the equation I just showed you is proof of that and is actually part of that. So what I'm telling you is if you have knowledge and you understand in the electrical universe or electrical, what is the one force that acts on all the other nuclear forces? Electrical. Electrical acts on gravity, strong nuclear force, and weak nuclear force. So electrical, it's an electrical process. And so one of the things that Stan Myers did with the Star Wars team is they hacked a lot of the electrical function in 21 patents of doing operations on water to make hydrogen and oxygen for combustion engine. Okay, so hydrogen, one of the things in a hydrogen world is when you, and let me share a screen again to show you something very briefly. When you know that, when you know that hydrogen is a noble fuel in the hydrogen world that we live in, okay, when you know that that's the case and you take a look at what that means, okay, hydrogen is it, the burn rate of hydrogen in combustion is noble. It's the fastest. So if I dilute it with nitrogen, for instance, I can make the burn rate of methanol, methane, alcohol, gasoline, natural gas, propane, or diesel. I can make the burn rate change. This is the world we live in, right? We live in a
What is
world where
changing the burn
hydrogen
rate? I'm
dominates
sorry. Wait,
everything.
wait.
Does
What
that
is
make sense?
changing? But what is changing the burn rate got to do with anything? What does that mean?
Well, what it means is that today, where we are today, okay, that hydrogen is in terms of physical chemistry, okay, it is the root of the periodic table. It is the root of the other elements. It was formed first. The world that we live in does not exist without hydrogen. The energy transfer from the fusion core to the space rock is a system. It was defined by Frank Drake. So, you know, one of the things I have to give a credit to Frank Chili and Jeff Rentz is they made me go and look at Frank Drake equation. I had never looked at this before. In the Milky Way, where we live on this little space rock, there's like 200 million plus space rocks like ours with fusion stars in the Milky Way.
Yeah.
Then you got 2 trillion galaxies like the Milky Way. So I haven't traveled to any of those space rocks yet. I just live on this one. I'm human. I'm trying to get a handle on what what drives the physics, what drives the physical chemistry, and related to these storms, hydrogen. And the reason I'm telling you these things about hydrogen and the hydrogen system is because they're all everything is on a foundation of hydrogen energy transfer, hydrogen combustion, DNA itself, the DNA of the plants that were put down and coded. Code was written for the plants. They were put on the space rock for the gravity field.
That's true. The humans as well, according to your sort of concept, right?
Well,
Our
in
DNA has to factor in. You know, they say that our emotions also drive weather. Okay. So that we we send out scalar waves and we affect weather in our general area, small area. Now, directing that energy is what we're really talking about with the directed energy weapon, right? So let me bring
Right.
this. I'm going to bring this image on the screen, and then you can,
Well,
because this.
I was gonna say you can have energy transfer. You can have from an orbital satellite with a nuclear powered or solar powered outside the atmosphere transfer kinetic energy in the form of electrical energy or other energies into the vortex, right? I just told you how it does it naturally with lightning, right? I can transfer electrical energy from space or from another system that is human made into the vortex and spin it up. It spins up electrically. I just showed you lightning and the Reagan team spins it up. But hydrogen and hydrogen oxide is what is driving that vortex. So transfer from a directed energy weapon, okay, let's call it a satellite. It's energy transfer from another satellite. You got the fusion star, which is the sun that naturally creates it. Now I create something else in space and I do a directed energy transfer into this. Can I accelerate the vortex using the same principles that I just discussed with you relative to what creates lightning and the other things? Yes.
Okay,
Yes,
but see
absolutely.
this picture? This is actually, I don't know if it's still valid, but a few days ago, actually 7 days or so ago, this was forming, okay, in the same
Yes.
place that the hurricane that was directed and hit you um, was forming, which is the Yucatan, okay, is in the area of the Yucatan. So you see how it was starting to form. Now, from here, they could direct it up towards Florida, right?
Right. But these are, understand that the oceans are responsible for all weather in our atmosphere. So the transfer of energy to the ocean and the ocean conditions in that area are favorable for a thermal vortex, which means the water's hot and the pressure is a low. So that's how you get a thermal vortex. But what happens is once you get the thermal vortex and it starts spinning, then you shear and flex the hydrogen oxygen bonds in water. And that's when you get the electrical effects. Lightning, when it triggers, it's like the electricity in a DC motor and it causes spinning by electrical oscillation. It's just like a DC motor. So you can, when I went kind of on a tangent with hydrogen, but it's hydrogen oxide bond. So if I have a satellite in space that is capable of transferring energy from itself directed into a vortex like that, can I increase the vortex speed? Yes. There's other environmental factors around that, like shear, weather temperature, atmospheric pressure. You want it to lower down so you can spin it. These are the things on the actual surface. They're ocean related, right? Ocean controls all the weather on this. It's a habitable planet. It's defined by the Drake equation, but understand that 70% of Earth is covered by water. There's a reason for that because the energy, it's like a solar panel. The energy transfer naturally from the fusion star is a natural thing, right? Now I enhance it with man-made human technology from space using energy transfer, same principles, but I just enhance it, right? But what I want to do is I want to hack that. What Scott wants to do is I don't want to do evil. The dark side wants to do evil. They want to spin a storm up and then use it as a weapon. So if you look at our patent, so I created the equation. My business partner, my minority business partner is a guy named John Dottie. He is an electrical engineer with a JD degree and is a patent lawyer. He's worked in nuclear power and power industry. Okay. So together we make the company for electrons. Our goal is positive. Okay, not negative. I'm not saying negative can't be done. If you look at figure 7 of our patent, we show where the electrical creation of hydrogen and oxygen and the combustion of it can cause these vortexes in the ocean. Okay. The technology that we're using, where it was
There is
born.
still potential of seeing tropical.
Okay, so I'm sorry about this. I want to show what they're showing, okay, on the
Yeah,
weather
go ahead
channel
and show
right
that.
now.
Development in
Okay.
the next couple of days. A broad area of low pressure is like
They're actually showing how this thing is steering now in a certain direction. And I understand your
Yeah, you
that's
can
not
steer
your
it.
intention, right?
Yes, you can steer it. So when in the hydrogen world that we're in, right? I want to do positive things, but negative things can be done. So where I'm getting at with the explanation to you is in these 4 patents, right? Figure 7 in our patent. You want me to show you what figure 7 is so you can see it? Okay, let me show you
Well,
what figure
we're going to
7
talk
is.
about it.
And then let's hope, well, hopefully I have figure 7 right here in one of the folders. Maybe I do. I bring it over very quickly. Maybe I didn't have figure 7 here.
Okay, well, let me
Well,
share.
I can move it. No, I can move it very quickly. It's just a matter of me moving it over to and showing you. It would really just take a second. The point of it is that figure 7 is an illustration of weather control. And the point of that reaction that I showed you,
Okay.
okay, the point of it being electrical is that once you come to the conclusion that you have the reaction that defines the system, right? Once you have that, okay, once you have it, there's figure 7, see, in the patent. So what I'm showing you here is this technology is from a small modular reactor that was born in the Manhattan Project and moved to the Nautilus Project for nuclear submarines to create oxygen from hydrogen oxide for sailors to breathe in a Cold War weapon system. That weapon system uses PIM, which is a technology that splits the hydrogen and oxygen to create the oxygen for the sailors, right? It's in the Nautilus. It's in all our submarines. It was a Cold War technology. This burning of the hydrogen and oxygen creates those vortexes that can create a hurricane. It can create rain. It can create sleet. It can create snow. But it's a vortex. And so the vortex, part of that vortex is the Coriolis force of the space rock that we are on that is spinning. It is spinning and is in a spiral around the sun while we are going through space. The effects of that vortex are manipulated by the sun and specifically manipulatable by us as humans. So if I want to do something bad, right, I can spin it up. If I want to create it, and figure 7 in our technology, we don't want to do bad. We want to enhance the human experience on Earth. So the whole idea conceptually is yes, I can spawn weather events from the oceans using Cold War nuclear technology that was born in submarines. So we have 4 patents in this area, right? But I don't want to do. Scott doesn't. I'm on the good side. I'm wearing a Dodger blue hat, but I'm a white hat. You know this. So
Yes.
I want to do positive things for humanity. But yin and yang, the scales of justice, all the things we've ever talked about, we've talked about balance in that you can have negative and you can have positive. So it's like, does Scott want to create biological weapons to kill people? Does Scott want to create bombs? I've been trained in all this by Captain Level 6 Full Bird expert on chemical warfare weapons. Okay. My legacy is my father and uncle were in the nuclear missile battalion. I'm not Dr. Evil. I didn't
Of
dress up as
course,
Dr. Evil for
people
Halloween.
would understand that. But the thing is that in terms of what's going on in the world right now, and
Yeah.
what you just went through in Florida,
Right.
and what I had put on the screen a little earlier with that picture of from the weather.com is an impending possible storm, which I have a more recent picture now, that they may be deciding to create. And they have reason, for example, with the vote coming up in Georgia, because there's a prediction that is saying that they're going to send a storm straight into Georgia right around the voting day. Okay. So that they can steer the vote so that people can't go to the polls and all that kind of thing. Then they might have a reason for not certifying the election based on the fact that certain states, due to the weather that hit them, are not in their normal voting ability. You know, they couldn't get to the polls and various things. And I would imagine that's very true for North
Well,
Carolina.
we're seeing a lot of coincidences, aren't we?
These are not.
Remember George Bush?
These
Okay,
are
we had
created.
hurricanes
It's
then. Yes.
created
All right.
by the
So
bad
I
guys.
showed you our technology and what our goal is. All right. This is Scott. I'm just a scientist. I mean, we just have the LLC. We have limited resources, right? I worked for Alphabet and Deep State. So when you have that kind of talent and resources, can you do these kind of things as a human? I just showed you. I just showed you what we're doing. I just showed you what our goals were, and I told you it was possible. So, absolutely, the capability to put up a rocket in space using kerosene or hydrogen, you go any way you want, and to put a nuclear reactor and do energy transfer. I showed you the fusion star, the natural system. Can it be done? Absolutely. And it doesn't even have to be a nuclear transfer. It could be a solar powered satellite that is charging batteries and capacitors and doing things more conventional even
Okay,
than
so let me ask you, are
yeah.
you saying that the directed energy weapons that are being used to direct these storms are on satellites?
I am saying to you that in our patents where we're doing good, Scott wants to use small modular reactors
I am
born in
not, okay, I
all right,
appreciate
no,
what
no, no,
you're
born
doing.
in submarines.
I
But
am
look,
more
can you
interested in what the dark side is doing. I think
right?
that
No, no, no.
people
I'm
that are
saying what
watching this
I
want
want
to
to use.
understand, what are they utilizing to do the things they're doing? Are they
They
using
can
satellites?
utilize my choice of preference is small modular reactor born in the Cold War because it's safe, it has a high energy yield, and it's
I know,
workable.
but is
I would
that what
say
the
if I
dark
was
side
in the
is?
deep state,
Scott,
I would
Scott, but is this what the dark side is using? What are they
I
using?
can't tell you for certain what technologies they are using. I can tell you what's available in their repertoire. There is available in their repertoire. SMR is available in their repertoire of energy producing capability to do exactly what you just said. It's available and it is optimal. It is
Okay, what about,
controllable.
okay, let me posit another question to you.
Okay.
Let's say the white hats want to stop them from doing this. Can they use the same kind of technology, directed energy weapons, to steer the storm in an opposite direction? In other words, we can have a kind of a tug-of-war between the light and the dark. Isn't that possible?
Yes. And so then what you have is you've got one side, there are parameters. There are a lot of meteorological parameters in a hurricane vortex that are really physics and physical chemistry when it comes down to it. So, you can have multiple sides. You can have an enemy that wants to do harm to you and your country, putting energy in and trying to steer something into your population to do damage and take casualties, right? And then you can have a good side, maybe they're white hats or, your military trying to stop that from happening. And so there you've got contention between two different sides. So absolutely. I'm just saying to
We're
you,
talking about what is in essence known to be called weather wars. Okay. And that's what we have going on this planet to a great degree. Now, if I show you this,
but in my repertoire of how I would do the weather war, how I would do it, I'm telling you that we want to do positive things, and our optimal choice is a small modular reactor, right? We want to do positive things. So if I was wanting to do negative things, which is destroy things, create vortexes, spin up vortexes, do damage pre-election and all those things, what I tell you, I would recommend the same thing. This is where I would recommend the same thing from a practical knowledge, from a practical application, from a practical capability. I would say leverage that, because I know that Elon Musk wants to go to Mars and he has to take SMR with him. He has no choice. He has no choice in the matter.
What is SMR?
Small modular reactor. So in 1954, when the Nautilus was born out of the Manhattan Project, Oppenheimer, and the detonation of the two bombs in Nagasaki and Hiroshima, right? That was born. The Nautilus was born out of that. That was a small modular reactor. For 10 years, we had accidents.
You're talking a small modular nuclear reactor?
Yes, it is a uranium reactor. It's running on pure fuel, but those 10 years we did have accidents. We haven't had accidents in 60 years. Where we are now with the technology, Carrie, is we have Hitachi and GE as one leader. So we have Rolls-Royce as another. And then we've got competitors in China and Russia that may be doing things that aren't good. Where we are today with this technology is we can run it on land, and if it loses power, it cools down naturally in 10 hours, and you don't have a 3 Mile Island core meltdown or Fukushima or any of that. Under the water, the reason that it is so safe is because, and this is why we have it in our nuclear submarine fleet, you can cool that in 10 minutes. And so the practicality of it makes it workable by humans, right? And if I want to do something bad in deep state in space, wouldn't I use a practical platform that I had control of that was safe? And so that's why I say, but in terms of energy, it does not matter, right? I could say diesel, I could say hydrogen combustion, but I could say diesel, I could say natural gas, SMR just happens to be a small form factor with high energy output, which is you need high energy output. These the power and the kinetic energy in these storms is tremendous. I mean, the actual energy is like that of practical nuclear bomb detonation in terms of destruction and transfer of kinetic energy into, you know, houses and buildings and things like that. There really is that level of power, and that's what you observe, but there's no radiation left over, right?
Except, well, I don't know if you can address this, but what they are finding is that the soil itself is toxic. It contains toxic chemicals. And I would posit that's from the chemtrails that were brought down to Earth, all the aluminum, barium, and everything else, as well as the nanographene oxide. is suddenly in the storm, was gathered up by the storm, turned into a vortex, and then brought down to Earth.
Okay. Well, let's think about things for a second. There's a lot of biological contamination that occurs as a result of tampering with atmosphere, right? You're bringing things from the ocean onto the land. You're moving pathogens that are natural. You're spreading them, okay? And on top of all that, I mentioned the sewer. Okay, here where I am, we had the sewer backup. So it wasn't just a flood that spread the sewer. All the pathogens from the sewer. What were they doing in COVID-19? Why were they analyzing the sewer? The sewer's full of pathogens, okay? And now you've spread it all over the land with one storm. Now you came with another storm that's full of wind and vortex. You pick it up and you throw it everywhere. So, you know, if you want to use a vortex or the atmosphere as a delivery system for a biological or chemical pathogen, yes, you can do so. That is part of, okay, so one of the warheads that my dad and Uncle Bill had was a sarin gas warhead, right? You detonate it into the atmosphere over a population. Well, with a natural vortex, you're spreading biological pathogens, and you can leverage that.
So is
So
it possible that if we analyze not only the soil, but the air and maybe even what hit the plants, in the area of Florida and North Carolina as a result of the storm, that they weren't just creating the damage on the houses, but they could have been unleashing another you know biological pathogen that would
it's
result
hard,
in a kind of a pandemic at some point
right?
in the future, right?
It's hard to quantify it without quantitative and qualitative analysis that shows, and it's very hard. It would be very hard for me as a scientist to 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 show that. And maybe that would be the reason why they would do it, but it would be hard to show that. What I can tell you for certain is in nature there are biological pathogens. Bacteria, fungi, mold, all these things are naturally there. Now, they're not flying through the air at 100 miles an hour. When these storms come through, they distribute it into the atmosphere. It becomes pathogenic at that point naturally. So now I can't really identify, but now you've got the sewers in play and you've got companies that were destroyed that had toxic materials in their warehouse that are being blown all through the atmosphere as well. After that situation, what you're seeing in North Carolina, what you're seeing in Tampa, Florida, right? You see a lot of people with respiratory conditions, and they've talked about it. I myself got bit by a sewer spider in 8 inches of sewer water here trying to sandbag. Now you got respiratory infections, right? Remember, they were testing for COVID in the sewer. What about MDR,
Maybe you're going to
multi-drug
turn into
resistant bacteria?
Spider-Man or something.
You know, it can be weaponized 100%, Gary.
You hear me? I said you got bit by a spider. Maybe you're going to turn into Spider-Man.
No, that would be funny, but no, I did feel a little weird after that. Although what happens with the spider bites in the sewer water is there's this bacteria that's flesh eating. The spider bite, people have been bitten by these spiders. They go in the hospital for a month and take antibiotics. So I treated that with the Allison V product that I created for multi-drug resistant bacteria and pathogens for the lungs because I have bad genetics and I was afflicted by that for 47 years. And then COVID nearly killed me. So I use a technology to my advantage. Not only not, I broke free of a rigged system of respiratory infections. I broke free of that, but I was bitten. So I've talked to people in North Carolina, people that have been up there volunteering. I've said, hey, let me send you this product. I've tried to do philanthropic things and help people. You know this.
Sure.
I have been beaten by this storm. I didn't expect to have a $10,000 damage bill and everything else. A lot of people's Christmases have been destroyed with this in a monetary system, but I've tried to help people. So my point, the value add of these technologies of the Allison B product and the thing that I created is in these unusual biological pathogenic landscape environments, whether they're being done on purpose with chemicals that are being introduced and sprayed by our ships or our people or somebody else, or just naturally occurring and they're lifting it up through the vortex and spreading it everywhere. I created this technology by hacking the DNA codes of the garlic plant to unleash the dosage and the reaction to create the allicin at the 100% yield where the plant failed. I hacked it so that I could then put it on the surface of my lungs in 1 millisecond so that way, when a hurricane occurred, and I've been working in all this mess, do not think I haven't been affected. I have been affected. Okay, I have been affected. So there's the Allison B product. How do I use it? Here I'm using,
and we do have it on
hardware, but
an ad for him on my website where you can click on it and get the product.
right, Allison B, and you can use Camelot as a code, and I'll give your customers 1 mil. The point is, for each and every action, there's an equal opposite reaction. So when bad things are done to us in terms of physics and chemistry from an enemy standpoint, whether it's the deep state, China, some enemy, non-human or human, we have a choice. We can sit back and take it and just be beaten, or we can counter it. Right? The Chatellier's principle, every reaction has equal opposite. So some of the reactions are how we engage that. So I saw people claiming, Sean Hendricks is one of them, claiming that he was up in North Carolina, it was dusty, and people were getting respiratory infections and they were taking amoxicillin. Well, you can take amoxicillin and MDR bacteria ain't going to do anything for you. You're going to keep getting sick in a loop. Right? So that is the value of that kind of technology and why I created it and the biochemistry of it. But the weather pieces and the vortex, where I am with that, I was working on that before even COVID, when I was having these respiratory infections all of my life. That was a journey that I was on, that it started in 2003 and to 2006, when I ate so much amoxicillin and augmentin and all that, I bled from my GI tract for 3 years. And then I was poisoned by a GI specialist who gave me methylprednisone that then damaged my pancreas and my liver, mainly my pancreas, and threw me into type 2 diabetes with steroid-induced diabetes, A1C 14, and all that. That was a journey, a spiritual journey.
Okay. But I want to get back to, I appreciate, your health, but
Understood.
in terms of this discussion,
Yes, ma'am.
why is it that you wanted to talk about the fact that we're in a hydrogen system? What is it about that people don't understand or need to understand?
Well, the first thing is we're in a hydrogen system and not a hydrocarbon system. So when I talk about petroleum fuels, the sun does not run on crude oil. It doesn't run on gasoline. It doesn't run on hydrocarbons. It
Yeah.
runs on hydrogen fusion. The earth does not run on hydrocarbons either. And it runs on hydrogen, a hydrogen system. The DNA codes run on top of it. So if I was looking where we stand in the middle of all these controversies, the elections, the fighting, the wars, the turmoil, the biggest problem that we have in the United States is energy. And it's not gasoline, okay? Gasoline is a John D. Rockefeller indoctrinated thing that we sold our soul to for a paper dollar, right? Where we are right now is we've got our current generation, we've got our children and future generations that need cheap energy. They need cheap energy and they need water. Okay. Because if they don't have cheap energy and water, they're not going to have food. Right. So the importance of that reaction, I'm going to go back to sharing my screen again, and the importance of it and why I wanted to talk about these things, and why it is I say SMR, and I go back to the whiteboard, is because in that system that is involved with the earth and the weather system, when we go and hack it with SMR instead of the fusion reactor, we're hacking it with SMR reactor. We're using that for the electrical force, not the sun, not solar power, not a diesel generator, not petroleum. We're using the force of the gravity of the earth and the water. When we use that system, we're creating these gases with a buoyant force. We can move hydrogen thousands of miles inward or to the mountains. That could be the mountains in California, right? We're taking control instead of in a way to generate a hurricane. We're taking control of a way to move hydrogen up an altitude where we can then fill Lake Mead and recover that power. That's what our patents are about, synthetic hydropower. Recover 90% of that hydropower and use it for electricity while generating potable water. Okay? No technology, none in existence today, can fill Lake Mead and not destroy the environment. Okay? You can't fill Lake Mead with seawater. You're going to destroy the whole environment. And so the point is, when you have the reaction, and I show the reaction here in a different way. When you have the reaction where you've hacked the system, now I can do good. Because in the western states where you live in California, as you know, the cost of water has gone skyrocketing. And those valleys in California, where 35% of our food is grown, are not getting the water that they need to grow the crops, to create the jobs, to create the food, to support the population. And so this is where no energy, water, and food is a problem. This is not the petrodollar, right? The petrodollar was a fiat currency propped up by the petroleum energy sector. That is fake. It is fiat. It's paper created, man-made. This system is created by the inventor of the DNA codes, the inventor of the hydrogen world, the hydrogen system, okay, that we live in. Because if those plants don't live and create the food that we need as DNA beings and animals that were created after, we are done. We're done for, right? We're done for. So the whole point here is create the energy, water, and food. Once you create that and do it in such a way where the population at 9 billion plus can have the energy, the water, and the food that it needs. Okay. Part of this involves it involves pyramids and growing water in a different way. These mountains, they look pyramidal for a reason, right? Because I can grow food inside of them.
That's
And
very interesting. They do say actually that some of the pyramids are actually creating a weather system locally to around those pyramids to where you can grow crops. Like that has made those areas much more fertile and able to produce food than it would have
Absolutely.
been otherwise. That's true in Egypt. you know, and it's true
That's part
also
of
in the
today's.
Bosnian, they said the Bosnian pyramid. And, you know, in my area, actually, I think I have mountains. They look like mountains, but they're actually pyramids. They're
Yes,
they're
that's
covered
part of
in
this. So
soil.
I got one right here in my hand. Isn't that kind of cool? It's a pyramid.
Yeah, right.
This one has a little. It's a little thing.
So for some reason, when they are on the in the environment, they actually help the crops, right?
Yes. So think about the seasons, right? There's four faces of a pyramid. There's four seasons. Light is always hitting a pyramid, but the pyramid as a structure. Okay, let's talk a little bit about pyramids because part of this, I surprised you with a pyramid, didn't I? Part of this is a pyramid, but think of a pyramid as a mountain.
Right.
Pyramid, it's a symbolic thing in terms of math and geometry that there's a lot of pyramid graffiti on the planet. There's pyramids everywhere, but they're also on other planets. It's symbolic in terms of math and geometry and operation function. So the next thing that I was going to show you after I showed you, hey, I can move water. Look, I can move water to the top of this pyramid and store it right here. And I can move hydrogen here and create water and electricity. And I can grow food inside this pyramid and I can contain it in such a way where if this is a mountain or a pyramid, it's not going to be affected by catastrophes such as Cat 5 hurricanes or tornadoes or drought like what you're seeing in the Midwest. So my initial when I first saw this was the Big Sur Mountains. I love the Big Sur Mountains in California. The Pacific Coast Highway one, you can grow food there inside. This all came from the mountains of Hispaniola that have been hit by thousands of hurricanes. They're still standing. They never fell. So with boring technology, you bore that out, right? But if I was to show you, and share the screen again and show you from the whiteboard, if I was to show you the pyramidal, let's see if I have it here. It is. Okay. If I was to show you what comes out of this and why the pyramid and why it's so important, because it's all, when I tell you, I'm going to tell you some things today, I guarantee you nobody's ever talked about them in this context. This is the 4 electrons technology I just mentioned to you. You see, there's the mountain, but on the right, I show you a man-made structure that can be made in Idaho or the Midwest or wherever you want with modern technology that is what we call beyond Cat 5 storm capable. And
Cool.
inside here, you see those little things? Those are
Mhm.
the robots that we make cars with today. These are the Apple robots that manage the crops 24/7 by 365. There's no human introduction of disease into the facility. It's grown here, and underneath that, you have the animals. So the food in this structure, which is ripping CO2, that's CO2 there. The food in the structure grown by the plants, and there's a reaction. It's photosynthesis. It's decarbonized. You get decarbonized credits under current law. The food that you don't eat as humans, you feed to the livestock, and the degassing, for lack of better terms, the cow farts are taken up by the system and cleaned up. And so this is all the technology that this all related to the 4 patents that are
Okay,
4
but what
electrons
about
is
the
involved
sun?
with.
How does the sunlight get into the plants?
Today, the energy is coming from E equals H nu directly into the system. It's naturally. So if I look, how's the sun? That's a great question. Let's jump over here and let me show you where it is. It's right here. Today, when I say, how does the sun come? And it's a little bit blurred. I'm sorry, but the electrons are coming from the sun. See, solar energy, 2 electrons in the reaction. and water from this and carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. What I'm telling you is our technology, BPSE, when we feed into this reaction in the DNA codes of the plant, we make glucose, oxygen, and water. And then we feed that in terms of starch and cellulose down to the animals and humans, and then we double back into it. That's a design by the design was by the creator of the hydrogen world that we live in. Okay. What Scott is doing, what Scott and John and 4 Electrons are doing is we're hacking that technology that drives weather, and we're hacking the technology on the weapon platform to intervene and create the energy, water, and food. Because those are the things that we as humans need to then break free of fiat lies and manufacture again. All right. This is the
Awesome.
white hat strategy, my white hat strategy of saying now we break free. Now we're no longer dependent on the fiat dollar, the petrodollar. We're no longer bound to the lie of the pyramid on the dollar, not the pyramid I showed you. We're not bound to that one. Okay. But I'm going to surprise you today, completely surprise you, because one of the things that came out of this, we're looking at energy equivalents in terms of petroleum rig counts and output of energy in the petro world versus hydrogen. I already told you hydrogen fusion is powering our whole world. One of the things that it took a long time to learn with this pyramid, the power plant, the Pyramid of Giza, okay, which was a hydrogen power plant. The people that architected that, right? They did things on a macro scale at a time in humanity when modern technology was not available, right? So one of the things I'm going to break to you today is the understanding. If you have understanding of the Pyramid of Giza, the power plant, the big one, that power plant, and what it did was it leveraged the hydrogen world and the hydrogen oxide system that we were in to create a hydrogen potential in terms of the atmosphere and the top of it, to create a potential that then the skin of the pyramid acted like a capacitor and held a charge, and then discharged to the local environment and did things like what you see on the wall of the pyramid, which is a light bulb, discharged to that light bulb power and illuminate so that people could inscribe inside the pyramid. Now, I'm going to tell you today where we are. I told you about hydrogen technology in the hydrogen world and the hurricanes and what powers it and the reaction and what we as humans can do if we are able to take control of our world that was given to us at birth, our birthright. What I'm going to tell you today is I hacked this. Okay. I hacked it. And what Scott has done is he's looked at the Pyramid of Giza and what everybody else has looked at in terms of the Nile River and the water piston and harmonic oscillation in the big chamber and the granite oscillation in the maser going up, creating the potential that then creates the discharge, it creates capacitance to the obelisks transfer. What I'm telling you today is in 2024, with modern solid state electronics and technology, I've created a design to create these so that remember, this is producing hydrogen into the King's chamber, we'll call it whatever you want, the granite oscillation that then creates a hydrogen maser through harmonics in the chamber, right? Resonance. I'm telling you that I've created an amplifier such that the bulk hydrogen that I just showed you from that reaction that can create hurricanes and weather, the bulk hydrogen that I can move 10,000, 1,000 miles, 3,000 miles, 10,000 miles inland from the Pacific Ocean, whatever, I
But
can
okay.
amplify it based on the pyramid technology. I can amplify it. I have created an amplifier that can amplify that in the atmosphere that we live in.
Right.
Not like this, like the creators of the Giza pyramid, like a power plant that is created with solid state electronics from modern humanity and run by us. Okay. So what I'm telling you
Okay,
is,
but how are you building the pyramid in
no, I'm
in
not
real
building a
time?
pyramid. No, I'm
Is
not
it
building a
a
pyramid.
okay? Is
Okay.
it a light structure? What is the structure?
Right. Let's look at this. Let's take in retrospect and look at what the big pyramid was. It was a power plant.
I
Once you
understand.
understand how it mechanically worked, okay, the people that architected that, they architected it on a scale in a crude way for the humans that were there. Okay. Now we're in 2024. We're talking on solid state computer, on fiber optic networks. You're in California, I'm in Tampa. We've got knowledge of solid state electronics and physics and electromagnetic spectrums and gravimetric spectrums and all the atmosphere and everything else. Remember, I showed you those patents. This is what I'm telling you is coming in future patents. Okay. Now, what was the pyramid doing with the River Nile? Okay. It was producing hydrogen. Okay. Specifically hydrogen and a hydrogen maser that was through the harmonics of the hull into the chamber, and the granite that was bouncing up and down created a maser that shot out of here. The hydrogen potential, the hydrogen gas, and the maser create a potential between the upper atmosphere. Okay, hydrogen's positive, ground is negative. It creates a potential. It's electrical potential, not a lightning bolt. A potential. A lightning bolt is extreme condition. What I am telling you is this: you can create any condition you want if you have enough hydrogen, right? So when I put down the pyramid and I say to you, look, I can create bulk hydrogen. I can move it inland 2,000 miles, right?
Okay,
Now,
but
what I do
don't you need
is,
a container of some kind?
no, I have a facility. Okay. Think of a power station facility. And
Is
what
it
I
shaped
now
like a
do,
pyramid or it's not shaped like a pyramid?
it doesn't have to be shaped like a pyramid, it's more modern. My point is, I use the hydrogen, okay, to create a potential between the upper atmosphere and the ground. The
I
ground is
understand.
negative. When
Like a
I create
vessel.
that,
You're
right,
creating a vessel.
when I create that potential,
Right.
okay, I can create a lightning bolt right there. Boom.
Okay.
From
So
the upper atmosphere.
you're bringing in the energy into this vessel, whatever the shape of it is. You're saying it
Remember,
doesn't
we live
have
in
to
a
be a
hydrogen
pyramid.
world. That atmosphere that encapsulates the earth is electromagnetic. It's
Right.
charged. It's
Right.
ionic. It's ionic. We've been seeing colors in
But
the atmosphere from
why?
aurora
Okay,
borealis,
but don't
from
you need to
ionization of the sun. It's
create?
electrically charged.
How does the plant
Positive.
look? How much space does it take up?
How much space does it take up? The
Yeah.
earth is inside the atmosphere.
No,
The atmosphere.
I'm talking about if you're going to create these, you said,
Oh, these facilities that I'm talking
yeah,
about, the
facilities.
amplifier. Look, this is a rock thing
Right.
done in a different mechanical way. This has got mechanical motion from the Nile River and materials of granite and other things and harmonics that were in it.
Right.
It was created on macro scale by a different civilization
So how do you create it on the micro scale?
that understood the hydrogen world,
Right.
right? What I want to do, okay, is I want to generate the hydrogen in the Pacific Ocean and bring it in Idaho. Now, when I bring it in Idaho, right, or Iowa or wherever, I
Right.
want to power metropolitan service area. Instead of I want the pyramid that I talked about before would be to grow food. This one, I want to power that area. So I'm going to amplify my power with an amplifier, like an acoustic amplifier. But what I'm going to do here is, okay, I'm going to take the hydrogen and I'm going to take an energy source, not the one in the pyramid, a man-made one. A man-made, I can't go too far in this because we're not there yet. Okay, I have to be very careful here. A man-made power source that will create a hydrogen potential between the upper atmosphere and the ground, which is negatively charged. It will create a lightning bolt. Okay,
I understand
create
that.
a
I
lightning bolt.
understand.
Now,
You know,
instead of the
I get what you're
potential,
saying, Scott. So you're not able
yeah,
to tell us the exact configuration of the facility at this time. Is that correct? Let me give you an
we are
example.
we are
Did
in
you
we
know
are
in
in
Russia?
design.
Wait,
Look,
do
we're in
you know
design
in
stages.
Russia? Wait, do you know in Russia they made 9 pyramids? Are you aware of that? They made 9 little pyramids in a place in near
Very
I think it's
interesting. I
near
don't know. I just
Moscow.
know about this pyramid and the
I'm just
Great
telling
Power
you what
Plant.
they did. They may be doing something similar with those pyramids. One of the
There's a
things they want
possibility
to
they
do.
already stole. Okay, Carrie, they already stole our hydrogen technology. I've been invited by the Chinese to go and speak in Japan and Australia. I'm not leaving the USA. The Russians are making hydrogen off of every naval base they have with nuclear technology. We suspect that they have stolen our technology. In fact, we suspect that the Russians and the bankers of the Russians, okay, to say it gently, wanted to move hydrogen and hydrogen mixes across the southern port of Crimea, across Nord Stream 2 into Europe, and dominate based on a diluted hydrogen mix, which burns the same rate as natural gas and propane. So, in order to stop that, what would you do? You would blow up the pipeline, because then you would create a dependence of Europe on Russian asset. And that could destabilize the world in terms of energy and economies, right? We've seen some things happen. But my point to you is this technology in the power plant that was originally the giant one, and what it did, when you take a step back and you see that it leveraged hydrogen, it was
Okay,
all
fair
based on
enough.
hydrogen.
Yeah.
What do I need to do that in the modern world? I need a boatload of bulk hydrogen, not just for cars, right? Because the grid is antiquated. The grid that we have, the transmission lines that lose power, that cause problems, that lose power over distances with
Well,
heat.
nobody wants to use wires for anything.
Well, it's antiquated. It's not logical. You're losing
Right.
power. Who wants to continue putting money into a losing effort? So the point is, when can create bulk hydrogen in the Pacific Ocean or anywhere at a depth, and I can move that hydrogen with its power capability without
Okay, but how do
losing.
you move that? How are you going to move it
Okay,
from point
in
A
the
to point
reaction
B?
that I showed you, when I
Yes.
produce that much hydrogen,
Right.
it has a buoyant force and a head pressure. So
Okay.
it moves in a pipeline just like oil. Free. There's no pumping. It's free. It's a pump head. You can get up
You
to
have to put
1100
it in a
psi.
pipe? No, no. You have to put
No
it in a
pipe.
pipe.
Yes, pipe.
That's not good.
Sure. We do it today. Okay. We do it today. So the point is this. Okay. Do I want to move pure hydrogen or do I want to dilute it? I showed you the curve rate. Don't we move natural gas and pipelines all over? We have one of the largest natural gas grids in the United States in Florida. Tico owns it. Used to be People's Gas. You can move hydrogen in diluted ways where it doesn't burn or combust. That's part of a turnkey transition where we move from a petroleum-based energy environment. We can't do this overnight. You bankrupt everybody. You can't tell them their cranes and backhoes and dump trucks are no longer good. You've got to create a seamless mechanism to get there. Okay. And it has to be economically favorable for everybody, right? even including the people in big oil who need to transition their way over. So why did Trump sign strategic petroleum reserve initiatives, as well as strategic uranium, as well as strategic rare earth element ones and EMP ones? Because everything is in play here. With EMP and hydrogen, there's no damage to the grid. There's no damage to transmission of power. You move it. My point with the amplifier technology that I'm telling you about, that I've designed, created, and am testing, is that the origin, this is a different way of doing the same thing that we can now do on a grand scale
Okay.
and evolve into. These are evolve into. So,
Okay. Let me ask you something, Scott.
Yeah.
What you've explained right here, do you need funding to do this?
Oh, absolutely. So where we are right now in the situation with funding, this is
Because I might know
the
somebody who would be
crossroads
willing to
of the
fund this.
system that
Wait,
we
wait.
live in.
So what if I knew somebody who wanted to fund you? How much do you need?
Oh, wow.
How much
So
does the United States need? You know what I'm saying?
if we
In other words, you're
wanted to
really talking
build
about the United
a
States.
self-sustaining 25-year demo building with like 2 megawatts, we could do that easy with $10 million. We laughed at the Biden Harris 7 regional hydrogen power plants for $7 billion. We laughed at that because we know, and we priced it. We priced it pre-COVID at building one bulk hydrogen plant to sustain 1 gigawatt of power at around $3 billion. Okay. And so we're talking about energy efficiency here and moving energy at, without attenuated problems. That problem, okay, the problem now is the material cost of materials in the service chain is going up, right? So we're looking at $7-8 billion now to build a plant like that. However, we had an amplifier problem. All right. So now we say, okay, we can improve the power availability to the metropolitan service areas by amplifying it cheaply. In other words, we might be able to build, and this is where we don't fully understand the technology. We might be able to build another facility for maybe 100 million or several hundred million or even $1 billion to do the amplification, right? And now I'm not rebuilding the root plant. What I do is I build 10 amplifiers. Okay. And I'm telling you that the technology, the foundation, and where we see it, and the example was in the power plant of the Great Pyramid. They were master architect of what they did in the hydrogen world we live in. So now I'm using that as cheap energy to I'm using it as cheap energy on the grid to power the regional grid where I already built it out, right? Your homes, your water heater, your oven, your air conditioner, whatever you need to do with electrical power. You can run battery cars if you want. I mean, that's your choice. Battery is limited in range by weight. It maxes out. The thing with liquid fuels or hydrogen is exponential in terms of weight. Your range is exponential. So that's the beauty of gasoline and diesel, but is also the beauty of when I now use hydrogen to power batteries and electric cars. I get exponential range and I get the economics that keeps things cheap so that I can have manufacturing again in the United States instead of farming it off to a country like China with cheap labor and giving it away, because we gave too much away and we don't make anything anymore. And where we got ourselves into the trouble with it was the fiat currency and the petrodollar, because it's paper. It's not of value to the hydrogen world, the hydrogen system.
Okay, so that actually, okay, now that's very
Yes.
beautiful what you've described. Okay.
Yes.
And I know, and you're quite brilliant, obviously. But remember, you told me about gold and the oceans. Now,
Yes.
how does that relate to that? Does
All
it
right.
relate at
So
all?
let's again share something really quick, just for the sake of
And we're going to have to, close this down because we can't
we
go for
will.
hours and hours because people
Okay,
don't
no
have to take
problem. I'll
shit.
make it quick.
Okay.
Maybe you have a Halloween party to go to, or you're going trick or treating.
No,
Okay, just teasing.
not me. Not me.
I hope to give candy out. I hope some kids come here. My wife says none are
Yeah.
coming
Yeah.
because
No,
there's nobody. There's nobody
nobody's in
here.
the mood for Halloween, and we just want to get the election done.
I'm sorry. This is important though to us. So here's a periodic table.
Right.
Human made periodic table. Nothing in this table happens without hydrogen. These are all the gifts to us that we humanly understand. We call it the periodic table elements. They are the gifts. They are the gifts to us in our world that creates everything here. Nobody said to carrier sky when we were born, hey, you got these aren't, these were all given to us with a planet. They came with a whole planet. All right. So look, silver's here, right? It's the number one electrical conductor. Copper's here. We use it for plumbing. Here's gold. These are transition metals. Gold. The problem that we have today, and it's very simple to explain, right? Everybody says, oh, we're having a run up in silver and gold, and silver and gold are in these passages in the Bible, but silver is a technology because it's the number one conductor of electricity. Yes, it has tremendous value because it comes out of the ground in a ratio that's about an average of 1 to 10, not the made up one with a created fiat system that's rigged paper that's being controlled that we live in clown world, right? Now, we have people saying, but wait a minute, it's technology, and that's why it's worth so much, and the cars and the electronics and all that. That's a human perspective. And I have the gold on my hat. We as humans have not realized the value of the gold technology for what it is. So if I go out and look at these ships with a sunken treasure and I pull the gold coins out and I look at them, they look the same as the day they were minted. They're not oxidized. That's a technology that was given to us on this planet by the engineer of it. It is a valuable technology. In fact, it's an anti-corrosive technology. So why isn't the Golden Gate Bridge painted gold? But the point is, when I build these plants in the ocean, I need to build them and coat them in gold so they don't oxidize and wear. Why did the Anunnakis say they came here? They came here because they needed technology to control their atmosphere. I just told you about the equation and methodology of controlling the atmosphere and leveraging systems using a nuclear power SMR in a golden encapsulated. This isn't a submarine. I'm not worried about a radar or a sonar system. I'm not worried about being painted with microwaves and radar. I'm not worried about any of that. I'm worried about building a plant that I put in the ocean that doesn't oxidize. That's what the gold technology is about because it doesn't oxidize. So when I coat the plant with gold, I don't have to worry about it oxidizing with the material that is underneath it might be iron and other things inside there that normally would oxidize in seawater. We don't value it as humans because we don't leverage it in society. So the problem that we have in our perspective is we sit here and say, wait a minute, we're leveraging a lot of silver for solar panels and batteries and electrical circuits and iPhones, Android phones, and computers that we're talking on. We're not leveraging all the gifts that were given to us. our birthright. Nowhere does it say anything about fiat dollars or anything. Our birthright on the hydrogen world and the hydrogen system, right? So the part of that is coming to the realization that when just in the space rock we're on, just in the American way, okay, that we're living in tumultuous times with turmoil, and our children and generations to come are in they're in, they're in danger, okay, because of what we've done. We have a path to correct it. And if we can do it and get back our country, get back our way of life, get back humanity, then we can work with other cultures to do that. We don't need to fight a war in Ukraine or drop nuclear bombs in South Korea or do any of that. What we need to do is evolve to it so that we can then leverage the rest of the Milky Way and the other things that we're not even touching. We're not even in. I know Elon Musk wants to go to Mars. Okay. Doesn't have a choice. He's going to have to use SMR reactor. He's going to have to decarbonize on a planetary level using the technologies I've told you. We are an X Prize, full disclosure. He's going to have to do these things on Mars. It is possible to do it on Mars. With the polar caps on Mars, when you melt them and leverage them and melt those caps, you can flood the whole planet 35 feet deep. When you build the systems that I told you, you can refuel rocket ships and come back, but you can grow food and water and manufacture there without the kerosene rockets. Okay. Yes. The biggest argument I ever had with Elon Musk was look, hydrogen is a low energy number one on the periodic table. To get the carbon and all the carbon fuels, I got to step up to C6. And there's a lot of energy in that, in all the systems and how carbon is created, in the universe. Okay. So I am always work smarter, not harder, right? Work smarter, not harder. I'm always giving my wife, when we were evacuating, we had dollies, and we're too old to be carrying totes. I'm like, we work smarter, not harder, putting them in the truck instead of trying to carry them like, through the house into the truck to run away from Milton. But my perspective is this: if we do these things, okay, we then will free up ourselves, right, to do more important things as DNA machines, right? Whether it's we want to spend time to understand metaphysical aspects about this hydrogen world, whether we want to just spend time enjoying it, okay, or we want to actually participate in these things like what I want to do. Yes, funding is a challenge in the fiat system, but it's a lie, okay? Because when you overcome the challenges on the planet, you're not worried about fiat anymore. It goes away.
Okay, now wait 1 second. There is a question which I think is interesting. And again, we just don't have time to go on and on. Okay, but this is a great overview. And
Yes.
we can come back and talk more about the Elon thing and the whole choices that are there. But
surprised you with the pyramid amplifier, didn't I? Happy Halloween.
Excellent. Very excellent. The thing is, someone in the chat said that you have had telepathic communication or something. They wanted you to speak about that. Do you have anything to say about that?
Sure. I have had downloads of things like the hydrogen atom and the particle physics related to it, relative to, I don't know why. I've had part of the metaphysical experiences that the mind is very powerful, right? The mind itself is a computer. The mind, humans, not even the best scientists. We don't fully understand the mind, its quantum potential. It's a quantum computer. The
Right.
heartbeat sent down the vagus nerve is a quantum entangled signal. I have to be respectful that I am just a human on a space rock in a hydrogen world, and it's much bigger. I have to be respectful. So I have to be respectful to the point that I have to embrace things that are given to me, right? Spiritually, metaphysically, or what are they? So I have been guided to things like understanding RNA algorithms or perceiving physics. And I think that Einstein was talking about imagination being more important than anything. Part of that is guidance. I don't know where it comes from. I'm just a human. But I do know that it has guided me in these directions. So, with understanding hydrogen, I understand a lot about hydrogen. I'm a scientist, but I'm still a human. There's probably a lot more there that I don't understand,
Okay,
right?
but you're more than a human. I mean, in other
But I'm
words,
just a
your
human.
your
To be honest, I
spirit
use the
and
same toilets
soul
and bathroom and drink,
inhabiting a human body, you're more than a human, you
but
know.
I am just a human. That's the truth. So I have to be honest with you.
On the
I have
physical, your
respect.
physical body is human. You're
Yes, I have
beyond that.
I
You
have
have a
respect.
soul, you have a spirit. Okay, you will exist beyond your body,
I'm
right?
trying to be good. Um, I'm trying to emanate good. I'm trying to leverage the good sides, the white hat side of the gifts in that table that were given to me at birth and you and all of us. I'm trying to
Yes, that's a
leverage
great way to
them,
look at it. And it is, it's
not
a lovely way to look at it.
yes.
Okay, so I want to thank you very much for being on the show on this really bizarre night, the 31st, Halloween.
Well, happy Halloween.
And thank you for the Halloween tricks and treats, that
Okay.
you're
And
sharing with us.
enjoy the evening. Um, I think that any person should leverage metaphysical capability if they can do it and have the experience. I think there are plenty of people that are more gifted than me, and I would say you, because you have a great understanding of metaphysical, and other people that I know that are around you have a tremendous understanding way beyond me. I'm a student of your work and these other folks around you, Aisha Dean, all of your friends, Laura Eisenhower, had a great time. All of that, Carrie, Serrata Beach Resort was destroyed. And,
Oh, wow.
Michael Jaco lives over in Mad Beach and everything. The beaches
Yes.
over here, they've been destroyed. They're not the same. I don't know if they'll ever be the same. Okay.
Okay.
But I know we're gonna do our best to rebuild that stuff. It's easier to do from a human perspective when you've got cheap energy and water and food. And also I think that what we've done over there, and it's another conversation for another day, um we've done some things over there that need to be upgraded. They're just the places around the beach. They're a problem waiting to happen, i.e., the condo in Miami that collapsed. No
Oh,
one wants to see
right.
people get hurt, but I call it God's playground. We joke around. I call it God's theme park, God's playground. You know, that stuff was created also by the creator, the oceans and the beauty of all that. So that was a great time. I enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed learning from the people that presented there, yourself included. And I continue to learn and leverage those things in the things that I was, the human system I was indoctrinated in. But I keep an open mind to try to leverage things that I can learn in order to help me grow and mature and do things that have a positive impact on humanity, which is what
Okay.
drives me to do these things. So
All right. Thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. And thanks everyone for watching. And we'll share this on Rumble and on other social media. And hopefully people will come back to you. Now, do you have an email address or somewhere they can write to you?
Sure. You can find us on X at 4Electrons, or on X at Allison V. In those places you'll find our email addresses, or you can communicate through there. www.allisonv.com, www.4electrons.com, and
and we'll put that under the video. Thank you very much. Okay.
thank you very much.
All
You have
right.
a
Take
wonderful
care.
evening. Happy Halloween.
Okay. You too. Okay. Bye-bye. Thanks everyone
Bye-bye.
for watching.
Okay.